it is created. Looks great, currently. Alright, we've mentioned before, we have the Articles of Confederation, and they are what is running the American government initially, but they fail. They're terrible, and the main problem, as George Washington says, is no money. And the US couldn't pay their debts. On the right, you see that's the Mediterranean Sea. There's pirates seizing American ships because the pirates demanded bribes, and the American government had no money to pay those bribes. And on the left, we have probably the most important event, which is called Shay's Rebellion. And Shay's Rebellion happens because there's a bunch of former Revolutionary War soldiers, and the US doesn't really have much money to pay them, A, for their service, and B, since the US owes so much money, states are putting in huge taxes, and up to, in some cases, 50% of people's incomes are being taxed. So these farmers are upset, they don't have money, they aren't getting paid, so they revolt. So in Springfield, Massachusetts, Shay's Rebellion happens, and they seize an armory and really cause a lot of destruction, and the US doesn't even have an army to put it down. They don't have money to stop this rebellion until private business people in Boston end up raising money to stop the rebellion from happening. So it really just shows that Articles of Confederation are a failure. They don't work. So thus begins the task of creating a colony, show up in Philadelphia with the purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. They're not meaning to write something new, they just want to fix what's existing. They realize quickly, though, that what's existing, the Articles of Confederation, is terrible, and they should just start again. And what they are really desiring is a republic, where people elect representatives to run the country. And they wanted federalism, and federalism is where states still had the power, the central government did not. They want the power to elect representatives, and they want states to have power the central government does not have. Apart from that, so we have these 6 main ideas. Republicanism, a form of government where the head of state is selected by the people, not a king. Federalism, as I mentioned, where states have power in relation to federal, the central government. They wanted checks and balances. So they wanted branches of government to ensure that others were doing their job for the interest of the people. So that if one branch of government is too powerful, then there's a way to check their power. Limited government, so you can't interfere with personal rights. Separation of powers, that there's different branches making decisions, not just one individual. And the fact that there's popular sovereignty. Sovereignty is the ability to control your own life. And popular sovereignty is really want to give people the ability to control what they're doing, how they're living, and you don't want the government to tell them what to do. So these are the big main ideas. And in these debates that happen in the Constitutional Convention, the first plan is put forward by Virginia. In the Virginia plan, they wanted 2 houses where representatives selected by population. Now this is favored by larger states because they would have more power. If they have more people living in their states, they would have more voice to make change. And they also wanted 3 branches. A legislative, which would be making laws, judicial, which would be ensuring that these laws were legal, and the executive branch to be the president, to be overseeing everything, which would allow for those checks and balances. The second plan was the New Jersey plan. New Jersey plan, they only wanted 1 house, and everyone got equal representation, so it was everyone had 2 representatives. And they wanted states to have far more power than the government. Now, this caused a lot of anger, so they ended up having the Great Compromise. Great Compromise had a couple components. There's two houses. So there's a house that's proportional to state population, and there's a house that's equal, that has equal representation. So currently, the House of Representatives, every state, depending on their size, has a different amount of representatives, whereas the Senate, every state has two representatives. And then you also have the judicial branch and a president. So that's the Great Compromise. The big question, though, that the states are having is, well, if we have representatives determined by population, how do we determine who a resident is? Are women included in population? Are children included in population? And namely, are slaves included in population? Slaves are considered property. How could they be considered people? And this causes a great divide and a debate. And eventually what they come across with is what's known as the Three-Fifths Compromise. Southern states, they wanted slaves to count in population. The northern states didn't want slaves to be counted. So they agreed to meet halfway, and slaves, in regards to population, so determining how many representatives you have, slaves would be counted as 3/5 of a human. Which in Kansas is fairly messed up. But it was a great compromise, the Three-Fifths Compromise, and it allowed the Constitution to continue. Now, after the Three-Fifths Compromise was finished, the Constitution was sent out to the states for ratification, which means the states are now saying, do we want this Constitution, or do we not want the Constitution? And one of the big issues for a lot of states was they wanted guarantees for the rights of their citizens. They wanted to know that the government couldn't intrude on the rights. So when the Constitution was sent out to the states, this is the main sticking point for a lot of people, saying it's a good way to run the country, but we seem to be giving a lot of power to the government, and we're not sure that there's any guarantees for the citizens. And this is where